One second. All right.
Hi,
Okay.
hi,
Hi. Hi.
hi, Parul. Thank you for
Hello.
finally being able to join us.
I
Just
know.
to give a
My
background
pleasure.
to everyone, today's session is with Parul Sondh, production designer who has done films like Titli, Daddy, Sir that we are eagerly waiting to see. So today, Parul, we are going to bombard you. I am going to bombard you with a lot of questions because I personally am I'm just in awe of the production design uh, aspect of filmmaking as a whole. Like
Hmm.
when I,
Hmm.
as a cinematographer, when I go on recce's and I see a location and then everything is discussed. The production designer is there and when
Hmm.
I go there to shoot and I see
Hmm.
the location like entirely transformed, it
Hmm.
just blows me away. I'm just in awe of what I see between the time when we wreck a place and between the time when we by the time we reach the location.
Yeah.
So, which brings me to my first question: that when you start on a project,
Hmm.
what is it? How do you prep for a project? Like, what all things do you take into consideration, and is cinematography also in your mind when you are making certain
Yes, of
decisions?
course. Yeah, of course, because film is a cinematic art. So, I mean, everything you think in terms of design has to be in terms of cinematography as well. Because, I could create a beautiful set. You could look at the set and be like, wow, and from the viewfinder, it could look like shit. So, it definitely, like, that is the primary thought when you are designing. How cinematic can you make the space, the narrative space, because it is kind of a, not kind, it is a spatial translation of the narrative, which is our job to translate the narrative spatially, to kind of create a narrative space for the drama to unfold, action, whatever it is, for the narrative to take place. So it is very important to kind of, you cannot take away cinematography from production design. It is sort of
Right.
like it works together.
Yeah.
I mean, because I have to make my design keeping in mind that it is a viewfinder, the lens, the ratio, the format, and that is the final output of my work, no matter whatever I create. So,
Right.
yeah, yeah.
So I always, whenever I start the session, I like to go back to the first film of, be it a cinematographer or a director
Hmm.
or a production designer, because they
Hmm.
are always special,
Yeah.
And I think the way we put in our heart and soul into our first project is something that all of us can associate with. So
Hmm.
your
Hmm.
first film, Titli,
Hmm.
uh, how did you prep for that? And it was also, looking at the design, it was uh, quite challenging in its own ways. So how did you go about preparing for that?
Yes, I mean, Titli in general was a challenging project from everything. We were shooting in Delhi. It was peak summer, so it was really hot. And, it is really difficult to shoot in Delhi as a woman, especially, when you have to go and interact with the vendors outside because it's not a film city. It's not Bombay. So you're actually dealing with civilians and, vendors who have no concept of time, and being a woman, it's way difficult. At least it was difficult 7 years back. That's when we shot Titli in Delhi. Titli is a good starting point to start this conversation. How did I prep for Titli? Basically, we had, before we shifted to Delhi for 3.5 months, we had gone there for about 2 weeks on a location scout. And during that location scout, we saw at least 50 odd houses all over Delhi. Not really in slum areas, but the areas which is, these are not government approved colonies. So these are these colonies, and that was the look we were looking for, Titli. And during that time is when my research happened. I generally am big on visual documentation. I take a lot of pictures, and those become my references for the work I create, taking details from A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and then kind of putting it all together and creating a space which is kind of true to the narrative. And Titli in general is a very claustrophobic, uneasy design. It is not, it also has to, when you get into the house as a viewer, it has to kind of take you into this, into the history of these people who are living there, to understand their present, And it is also narrative which is completely, in the sense it's not, it also has a world view. It is in relation to another world, which is a socio-economic world. So there were a lot of elements which were taken from Delhi as well, from, like a PAN card flex or something like, there's a lot of like, that is how I kind of prep for Titli. Yeah.
And the house in Titli is one of its very, it carries the character of that film quite a bit.
Yeah.
And it seems very cluttered, and but at the same time it carries something about the characters. There's a
Yes,
lot
yes,
that has
yeah.
gone into it. So
Exactly.
how did you go on preparing that house? I mean, how much of it
Well,
did you? No, you should.
Yeah, so basically we kind of like, finally after going through so many houses, we found one which was a very, very happy house. It was a wedding, when we entered that house for location scout, and that finally became Titli's house. It was a very bright pink happy house with a lot of children running around. And but that's not what we wanted for the narrative. So there was a lot of work which was done on Titli's house. We broke the entire house. We changed the geography of the house. So and then I had to retexture it back, repaint it back. So basically the first thing we did was to figure out the spatial geometry of the house, and that required breaking it and rebuilding it. And then secondly came the the colors and the textures, because there's an entire kind of a subtext which we wanted to come out. There's an entire history there. There are people who have been living there for many, many years. So everything in that house actually has a thought behind it. It is not just placed there for the sake of it, because it needs to look cluttered and it needs to look messy and it needs to look lower middle class. That was not the idea. The idea was that when you get in, you kind of understand, you will see a sewing machine, then you're going to see like a kid's chair, like a pink kid's chair, broken. So there are a lot of like things around, there are curtains. I mean, the guys are not going to put the curtains. So clearly there were women before, and when you see the narrative, you see that there was a woman, there were women. And in general, there's this entire, that the whole point of that house was to show the history of these characters, so it has to have that kind of props, that kind of detail. So it was, so yeah.
Yeah, and I think that came out wonderfully well. Often there is this thought which kind of circulates that when it is real locations, let's say, or when a film needs to look a certain class, not a lot of work has to be done in terms of production design. That is some sort of a wrong notion which goes around. That have you faced any of that? Have you heard that, or?
No, it really depends, I mean, in the sense, sometimes you do have a very less budget, so you can't do anything apart from maybe changing the color or maybe whatever. But I generally don't work like that. All my projects which I've done in terms of narrative projects, be it films, feature films or short films, I've always done set builds and constructed something or the other in a real location. It has never been like, oh, I go to a real location and I just like prop 2-3 things and I'm out. It's never been like that. And I enjoy that. It does come with a lot of restrictions, because then you are kind of stuck with the measurements, the dimension of a real location. And then when you have to make a set on a real location, these parameters are kind of confine you in terms of you have to work with the architecture. Whereas when you build a set in a studio, you can do whatever you like, because you have the floor. So you can create what you want, whatever dimension you want. So there are restrictions, but no, I have... like even in Juice, which was a short film, and we really didn't have any budget, I had to create that space. It wasn't something which we just went and shot. That entire thing was created. It was an open plan bungalow in Mud Island, which we made into like a middle class North Indian flat bungalow kind of a thing. So yeah, in my work at least, I've not just gone to a real location and just put 2-3 frames and that's the end of it, or change the color. I have worked a lot on it, so as of now. But I do understand that sometimes you cannot, like you just don't have the budget to do it. So
Right.
yeah.
So how do you work with those limitations? I mean, for example, especially in short films, whenever you're working on a short film and you have done, so see, what happens is that many people, when they want to start a short film, and production design is often something that suffers,
Yeah.
whereas you and there is also this hesitation in approaching bigger production designers, considering the budget considerations and all of that. So how did you work in Juice, and what is your approach in those lower budget projects?
I don't know. I've always worked in lower budgets compared to the budget of the film. My department is always low. So whether it's a feature film or a short film is the same. I don't think there's too much of a difference. I think my approach is very straightforward. I go for the narrative. If I really like the narrative and if I like the vision of the director, then I definitely go for it. I've done films in which I have gotten no money at all. But I've still done that because I wanted to collaborate with that director. I wanted to collaborate and work on that narrative. So for me, the approach is more like that. I don't really see films as a way where I earn a lot of money. For that, I think I used to do a lot of advertising in between for the money part of it. But for films, I think it is also because I'm really interested in narrative. I'm really interested in this whole art of production design. It is, for me, it is not about building sets. It's about how I can create this world. How can I especially translate the narrative so that when you enter that world, that atmosphere is created that way. You do feel that you're part of that world. So I guess for me, I go for narratives. So even if it's a small budget or a big budget, it really depends upon the narrative and the director, really.
And I think even with smaller budgets, if there is a certain kind of planning much ahead of time and certain kind of thought given to everything that the narrative demands, then I think it's possible to include a lot of elements which can make a lot of difference. Because as a cinematographer, sometimes you do miss. Let's say in projects where you don't have a lot of production design support, you do miss certain things, and I personally do wish for that oftentimes. That I wish there was somebody who could just help me transform this space in some ways.
Yes,
or
yes,
at least,
for sure.
because I was also going to touch upon the time when Titli was released, and between the time when Titli was made and it was released, there was quite a bit of gap.
Yes,
And
yeah.
and so, how did you deal with that time frame? Maybe for all the filmmakers, who have to deal with such a gap between their first project and the next, they can learn something.
Yes, I think we did Titli in 2013, and I think it released sometime in November 2015. So it was pretty much like a really long gap. And I hadn't really assisted a lot of people. I hadn't been working in the art department for too long, so I didn't really know anybody really. And nobody knew me as well. So, you would say, oh, I've done this film and Titli, but everybody would be like, okay, now, so what, because there was nothing to show. There was no trailer, there was nothing. So it was a difficult period at that point of time. It also makes you very insecure. You're very, there's no stability, there's no money really coming in. And I think that is the time when I started getting in touch with people from advertising. Because again, I didn't know anyone in advertising, but I knew maybe one person or couple, and then from there I started doing ads. And then I quickly went to Cannes and the trailer released, and that was the time when work started coming in, because everybody wanted a middle class home in Delhi, and everybody wanted, and that's those are the offers I got. But in between that period, I'd also prepped for 3 films, feature films, properly. We had gone for location scouts, we had done the design, we were about to shoot also, but for some reason or the other, they never happened. So 3 films in a period of 2 years. So I sort of also started feeling, am I jinxed? Will I be able to do a film again? So there are so many things. What you have to do is you just have to kind of like keep going. You have to kind of like, keep developing your skills, maybe. Sort of like not stopping work, doing whatever you can. And that was also the time where I did a short stint in television. I worked as a consultant on this really, on the soap, Star Plus, where they wanted to change the look of the serial after 20 years, and then they wanted something contemporary. So I did all these kind of jobs also, whatever sailed my boat at that time. But you do it because even if you're doing television, even if you're doing ads or films, or short films or whatever, you're still learning. So I think the point is to constantly keep learning. And if you don't have a project, then you create your own project. You go out, you do something or the other. I'm big on visual documentation, and by that I don't necessarily mean taking my phone and taking photographs, but actually going out with a camera and thinking that this is the space I want to kind of just photograph, because these references and these images is what I kind of reference to when I'm making any kind of world. This is how I take details out. So you have to constantly keep kind of motivating yourself. I'm not saying that it's all very happy and very joyful and you don't get depressed. You do, but that's also what Bombay teaches. Bombay teaches you resilience. So you kind of just go there and you keep doing it. So it's like that, yeah.
I mean, your journey has actually been quite interesting. And so you mentioned at some point that when you were looking for work after Titli, you were given similar kind of projects, as in to create similar looks. So
Yeah,
how does that go down with you? I mean, what were your thoughts?
I guess that's why my filmography is very tiny. I just don't like, for me as a production designer, I don't like to, I don't want to keep doing the same thing again and again and again and again. If that's the case, then I would prefer to do advertising. The turnaround period is shorter, and you can, I mean, it's a different aesthetic altogether, it's a different space altogether, but then I would prefer to do that than to do long formats in which I'm doing the same thing again and again. Once I've made a middle class house, I mean, there's no motivation, there's no motivation for me to keep making middle class homes for the rest of my career. Now, after Daddy, I did a period film and I got, projects which were all period. So now, when Sir releases, it's sort of like a contemporary design. It's very interior design, contemporary. Probably I'll get then maybe contemporary design projects. So I think like one thing people need to understand is that as a production designer, you would want to kind of create different worlds, you would want to kind of explore different worlds. And I think once you have a skill set, you can utilize that skill set in different worlds as well. Television doesn't necessarily need to be, okay, this, to put it in a box, I think is something which is kind of like, I am not a big fan of it, and I try to kind of not do projects like that or not choose projects like that in general.
Yeah, I mean, I think because as an artist, you would want to experiment, and you would rather be judged not just by what is out there, but what you may be capable of.
Yes, exactly. And also to push myself to kind of like, see whether I can do it or not. I mean, it is not only about what people want from me. It is also about what I want from my art and craft. Like how would I want to, progress as a professional, like what I would like to add to my knowledge, to my skill set. So it's like that. It's not just about making money, it's not about just doing big projects like that. That's why I don't think, that's why I said that, in most of my feature films, I've not really done big budget films like that. They might look big budget, but they're not big budget, so it's like that.
I think more and more, I heard from somebody else yesterday, and, I think because it's very true that, art requires certain kind of sacrifices.
Yeah.
and certain kind of challenges. And I think, unless an artist is challenged enough, I don't think the best can come out of them.
Yes.
And it's even, as a cinematographer, I think everybody wants to try different mediums, different narratives, so as
Yeah.
to, because every new kind of narrative ends up teaching you something new
Yeah.
also. Um,
Also,
bec-
otherwise you're in your comfort zone. I can make
right.
a lot of middle class homes and get money and do texture it like, the way I can do all of that. But I mean, I would also want to do like futuristic sci-fi film. I would also like to do kind of like a complete fantasy out and out. And because that is something which I have not done till now. So this is something which I would want to experience and learn and see
Yeah.
how can I use my craft in what way. And it's always about expanding your craft and your art. It's always about pushing your limits. You can't be happy and satisfied with just doing one kind of thing all the
Yeah.
time.
Right.
I mean, you're a production designer or a cinematographer, you're in films. That's the
Right.
opportunity and the freedom we have, the liberty to experience different narratives. Now, if you stick to one kind of narrative in one space, in one world, then it's not that enjoyable after a point, right?
Yeah. And there are so many stories out there which
Yeah,
need to be told.
exactly.
And so, how was it for you? Like when you moved from Titli to advertising to Daddy, which was a period film. How was how was the prep for that, and how did you find that experience?
uh, uh, what yeah, Daddy in general, was a very challenging project for the simple reason we didn't even have a script really. And but it was also a lot of fun in the sense like, at that point of time when we were kind of working on it, it was a little frustrating because we didn't really have a script, we didn't really have this. But to work with Oshim, who's very exacting and who is in general has a great vision, it was really fun. And in terms of, it was a kind of a project which was not very streamlined because it just started. And then we just had to get into production. So we kind of broke it into setups. So what we first did was we decided to get into the massive set build, which was the Dagri Chawl, which I built in Versova. And to finish everything before monsoon, whatever like the scenes are of Dagri Chawl. And then we took a break of about 2 months, and then we went into the real locations, which one, I mean, we created sets in real location as well. Everything is created because in 2016, it's not the same Bombay. Even if you have the same architecture, things are different, like you have to work on it and make it look like a period film. There was a lot of research which went into it. There was a lot of things I experimented with in terms of, because, in actuality, we shot 4 decades from the 60s to the 2000s. But in the film, what you see mainly is a little bit of 70s, more of 80s, a bit of touching on 90s and 2000s, like that. So there was 5 decades. So there was a lot of so there was a lot of period research because it had to look from that period. So that means like even in terms of your advertisements, even in terms of what products you're using, even in terms of like what kind of patterns are you using, what kind of materials you're using in the set, all of that was researched. And so it was a boom bang film, but there was insane amount of research also. And I also had a great cinematographer I worked with on it, Jessica, and it was a great collaboration also because mostly, if you notice in Daddy, the eras are mostly shown, the change in the light temperature in the lights is what you get to know what era it is. It's not basically in terms of the colors. If you see, it's more about the light. Your white lights, your cool lights, your warm lights, the way it has been done. The transition is according to the lighting, is by lighting. So there's
Right.
a whole lot of, and Jessica is also a very collaborative cinematographer. So in general, it was a great collaboration. And there was a lot of fun. It was a tough project to shoot, but I think looking back, it is one of my fun experiences. Learned so much, really.
Right. I mean,
Hmm.
I believe that even creating the atmosphere of let's say maybe 2 decades back or something
Hmm.
like that can be challenging also, because in, like you said, though there are some structures that are available, that are still there, and but there is a difference. And also there's another challenge that any period film that you will see will go back to those particular places only to
Yeah,
end up,
exactly.
shooting to
Yeah.
shoot,
Yeah.
a period film. So
Yeah.
the additional challenge is to how to make your film stand out, being shot. I mean, stand out from another film that has been shot in the same location. Pretty much.
Yes, but it also then depends upon how your director visualizes that space also, huh? So it is also like a
Right.
collaboration with the director as well. So it's not just because, I've been recently prepping on another film and we have gone to the same locations, but you see the difference. How two people can see the same thing in a very different way, and that's very amazing and that's really fascinating. So, I mean, of course, there are a lot of examples in which you go to a place and it is shot in a similar way, in a similar thing. But then you would like to work with people who see the same place in a different way. Or you would
Right.
try to work with
Yeah.
directors with a vision
I
which
think
is original.
right.
So I guess that, and also then of course, I mean, you don't want your work to be a replica of someone else's work. So you kind of, if you're stuck in the same setup and you don't really have a choice, and you start to figure out a way you can change it. So you think about the spatial geometry, you think about kind of colors, or you kind of like think what textures can I add to make it look different, what kind of, how can I play with the same space and make it look different. And that, by that I would mean is that you would kind of get into a little bit of construction or build here and there, figure out the depth, maybe change the way the depth is, so you kind of like work on that space, and the idea
Right.
is to make it look different from
Right.
what was before or how it has been seen before. So yes, yeah.
Exactly. So a lot of work actually goes into, recreating those real locations oftentimes,
Yeah.
as per, the visual scheme that has been thought of by the director and the production designer and the cinematographer together. I think
Yeah.
that's how a project really gets its visual face.
Yes.
And okay, I had a question, a similar question from two people. I have the name. One is Priya Seth, our very esteemed cinematographer, and the other one, I'm sorry, I don't know the name is Cine. Sorry. Okay, I lose it. Sorry if I mean, I'm sure the person will get to know that it's her question because they're similar. About since there is so much of stereotyping that happens, and for sometimes for women it can be a bit more than
Yes.
for
Always is.
for their male counterparts.
Yes.
So, what are the chances of you getting, let's say, a sci-fi film? Although there are close to none. There's one made by Aarti Kadar, which is, really amazing. But in
One can
future, like,
hope.
what are the?
One can hope. I hope. I mean, like, but I do have collaborators who are male directors and who have given me chances to explore, be it Kanu, be it Oshim. I'm assuming that if they do understand what I can bring to the table, so I'm assuming when they make a film like that, I hope they give me a call. Or somebody else who watches it and says, okay, yeah, because at the end of the thing, like the theme which I really love and which I would really love to explore is dystopia. And what better way than to explore it in a sci-fi film? No, exactly.
Right,
So I would,
right.
I think I would be an asset because it is one of my favorite themes. So,
Yeah, I
so yeah,
mean,
I hope
what?
so.
Yeah, one can only hope, and I surely
Yes,
do
I know.
hope that you get it.
Yeah, because I cannot be like, oh, I'm going to get it. So I just hope, like all the male directors who have worked with me before, or even female directors, I hope when they make a sci-fi film, and I hope they do, they give me a call, and I would love to work on that. Yeah.
And so you have worked in ads, you've worked in films, and you've worked in documentaries as well. How is the process different for you between these mediums?
See, in documentaries, I've worked more in terms of like I was an executive producer and it was more research and production based. I think what has happened is because I came into production design after working in documentaries for a good amount of time. So what happened was that I think that my love for communities and spaces in general also kind of started at that point of time. or maybe it's a childhood thing because I'm an army kid and I've shifted all over India. So I don't know when it started, but it was something which I really enjoyed while I was doing documentaries, and it also gave me sense of how to work independently, how to work with small budgets, how to kind of make things happen. Even if you are not, say, in a film city like Bombay, or if you're working in a Delhi, or if you're working in, say, Agra, or if you're working anywhere, how to work with people who are not from the industry, and how to maintain small budgets, and how to give quality. So I think that is what I took from my love for research and the worlds I took from documentaries, and I've put that a lot in my production design work in general. I think I'm very grateful that I actually have had that large stint in documentaries. I don't think I would be able to do as much as I'm able to now if I wouldn't have done that. It gave me some kind of like a strong point of view and a world view. And in ads, I've learned how to kind of not to get too involved with my work, to kind of have, to take it easy also at times, because I could be a kind of person who doesn't take things very easy. When I'm doing a long format, I'm so into it that I kind of, I just get too involved in it. So maybe in advertising, I have learned to maybe take it easy, to have some fun also, to kind of and also the turnarounds, and also how to kind of handle big budgets, because I've done big budget ads as well. So I've learned that from ads. The turnaround time. And in films, every film is an experience, as you would know. So it's never the same, right? I mean, none of our projects are ever the same, be it ads, documentaries, or film. But films especially, you give so much of your time, your life. If you're on a film, you're just on a film. You don't have a life. At least for production design department, because the minute we get into prep till production, we really are working on that film, because we have so much to cover and then so much to execute after designing all of that. So we are constantly just working. So your 2.5, 3 months, sometimes 4 months just goes. You don't meet your friends after a point. You don't have a life. So you give so much to it that when the project ends, you feel so sad. You feel as if then it takes, at least for me, it takes some time to be like, okay, okay, fine,
like
it's gone.
Withdrawal symptoms.
Yes, because it's pretty much your life at that point of time. So it's kind of like that. Yeah.
I always used to believe that. I mean, that after every film, you just come out slightly different person.
Battered,
maybe for
different.
Maybe for a little bit of time, but you definitely come out a slightly different person.
Yeah, it's kind of like a battle, no? Right? With it's like you're in the middle of it and everything is happening, and you're kind of.
Also you.
No, I know, I'm joking.
You also make a family, like there.
Of course.
I mean, your crew is your family. Everybody you're working with is your family, especially if you're working, outside of Mumbai. So I mean, that way I think I
no, you
understand.
make relationships, you burn relationships, you make relationships. It's like that. There's a lot of things which happen when you do a film.
And especially for okay. Before I go on to the next question, Anuradha she's also a cinematographer, has a question which we are going to come to that towards the end. That is, it's about the working in the times of post-corona. But by the way, you are based out of Paris now. How are things over there? How is it there?
It's fine now, because we are right now in the deconfinement phase. So, things have started opening. Not the cafes, restaurants, or cinema, but in general, I go for walks wearing a mask. It's a little strange because now you have to. The other day, I was wearing lipstick and then I had to put a mask, and I was like, now. I mean, you know what I mean? Your sense of everything has kind of changed with you, because your mask is sort of like covers you. You take your sanitizer, you maintain the distance, you try not to touch surfaces in general. So you're more cautious also, because before, when Corona was kind of was becoming a common knowledge in the world, you didn't really realize all these things. But now I think it's also kind of an auto response, because you don't
Yeah.
want to be stuck in your home forever. You know, I'm a
Yeah.
hibernator
Yeah.
and I'm saying that.
Yeah,
You want to get
things
out.
are definitely going to change.
Yeah.
But we will come back to that. But before that, I wanted to also understand from you that, as a cinematographer, cinematographers have a lot of requests from production designers. Oftentimes, when, if you can give us a window here or something here or whatever, a lot of. So what are the things that you would like to request a cinematographer when you are, making?
I think not to get angry if art is still working, because it's not purely our fault. Sometimes, we don't get permission to go in first. And secondly, to maybe tell us exactly where they want the practicals, to kind of like point it out on our floor plans. Because that's easy for us. Otherwise, we are thinking here and then it's like, no, we don't want it here, we want it there. I guess that can simplify the process in general. And
Floor
other
plan.
than that,
Okay.
yeah, I give them the floor plan, and then all they have to do is just point, okay, I need my practical to be here, to be there on that wall, that high, something like that, And that's how I worked with a lot of international cinematographers also. So it's easier.
Right.
Like that, yeah.
Right. Yeah. Some of the cinematographers are saying here that copy that.
Yes, it's good,
This is
It's really good, because even and you will know that art will then not mess it up. So you won't get angry when you come on the floor. You'll have a smile because art has given you your practicals exactly where you want. So it's good.
right. But often, how do you collaborate with? There was another funny comment, but anyway.
Yeah, if you do that, who will we blame? Yes, you can still blame art, but at least it'll be easy for all of us. So yeah.
What has been your, when you collaborate, you have collaborated with different kinds of cinematographers, different cinematographers. And what has been your experience, and what have been your takeaways, from all these different collaborations, and how do you work with different people? Everybody has a different way of working.
Yes,
And
yes.
and
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, patience is something which I've taken away from many of the cinematographers I've worked with. And to kind of like have a sense of calm even if everything is going wrong. For some reason, whenever the lighting and the technical team comes in, the camera team comes in, you always think they know everything. Even if they don't know anything, you just feel they know everything. And I think that's a fantastic thing to have,
right.
Like imagine if the art team is doing everything and everybody thinks they know everything. I think it's fantastic. So that is one thing which I've learned from cinematography department in general. I've generally have had great collaborations apart from maybe one series. I'm talking about long formats. But that series never really happens, so it's fine. Other than that, I think in general, I've gotten along with the cinematographer because I kind of, like I said, like when I design, I only think about how cinematically can I make the space so that it is easy for everyone. I do want to make the cinematographer's life easy. And I do consider the cinematographer to be a very close collaborator. And in general, to
Yeah.
discuss not only colors is something which you discuss with the director, with the cinematographer, and in general, that comes in part of your design thing. But to kind of like figure out if you're stuck somewhere, to just kind of have that kind of collaboration and partnership where you can ask and the other person, to have no intimidation when you're kind of collaborating together, because that is so important, I think, for me. And yes, I've learned these things in my collaborations, and I really enjoy working with cinematographers in general.
What were the
So,
challenges? Without taking any names, what were the challenges? What were the challenges that you faced when the collaboration didn't work as per,
I think there's
your
just kind of being
design?
insecure, being kind of like egoistic, having no plan yourself, but trying to blame game it. That kind of an attitude, I think, is not something which is healthy when you're on a film set or a long format set. The idea is not to saunter in and be like, oh, I'm a DOP. The idea is to be a collaborator. We are making a project together and we work together. There shouldn't be this kind of, and that, I think, more than the technical working problem, it was more of a personal egoistic problem, in the sense, just like stupid things which kind of, your collaboration kind of fails because of that. So, yeah.
Okay. Somebody has asked, again, in her name, so I don't know the exact name, but so sorry, Tasha. Natasha, I think it's Natasha. What is your suggestions? What are your suggestions, advice to your DP in relation to a more conducive collaboration?
Yeah, I think first thing to definitely always push for a look test. And by that, I don't mean a camera test. I don't mean a costume test. I mean an actual look test where you're kind of like figuring out the film colors, where you're figuring out like exactly. So because what happens then is that even as a production designer, you kind of understand the kind of lighting that will be happening. And then you kind of think about materials and patterns like that. You kind of think of colors like that. It just helps you elevate your design so that it kind of, I think that is something which I would really go for, a complete look test, not just, in bits and parts here or there, but like a complete where you know what kind of movement is going to go, what kind of aspect ratio, what kind of color, what kind of lighting. So yeah, to start from the look test and then to get into the floor plan practical, like that.
But how about in projects where you don't have the money to be able to afford that?
I've not, like I said, I've not really done big budget films, but we have already we have always managed to do kind of like look test in general. Like in Italy, for example, we did a look test in Warsaw. We took up a little place and we kind of used our film colors. I made texture boards. It doesn't take too much of money to do a look test, I'm not saying like we go onto a studio floor and make an entire set and we do that. But even if you make by two board of textures and the colors and, like you shoot it, you kind of understand that how will a color look on a particular camera, or in the sense like how the DP is thinking about lighting. So it just helps me because then I can think about that while I'm kind of designing my project, it just makes it easy for me. And I think for the costume designer and I think for the makeup artist as well, for the entire production design department, I think it just gets easier.
Also, I think, sometimes, like, for example, Dhavika, another cinematographer here, mentions that, it's very difficult to get budgets for look tests and it's kind of a little rarity. I think, there has to be a drive from all the main key people in that process. To kind of somehow figure it out.
Yeah.
Even in a smaller project, let's say. Also, like, who are you teaming up with? That is also.
But like, I'm sure all cinematographers in general go for a camera test, right? So like in our department, can come up with the 2x2 boards and can do that kind of texture and that color. And it will not be that much expensive. It will be probably 5,000, 6,000 to do that for us. And you put that in front of the camera and you kind of see like how it's going to look and what it is going to happen. So it is possible because I've done it like that as well. So I've done it where we have taken up a little house and we have done it. And then I've done it in a lighting grip space as well, where the camera test happens in general to see how the camera is. So I've done that as well. I think it would be nice, but I do understand that sometimes you don't have the budget and so you don't do it. Like, it cannot happen. So, yeah.
Okay, there's one more question. It has gone up. To what extent do you think the Indian audience can articulate an abstraction of a concept in terms of the form and content of film?
I'm guessing it means like whether the Indian audience can understand when you really have a production design or not.
I mean, my understanding is that can the Indian audience able to maybe you'll have to simplify the question for us a bit. Sorry.
Yeah.
I mean, I mean, in in a gist, but I would say that I think there is an audience for all kind of content.
Yeah, there is. I think, like,
and
the power of production design, if you really see, first of all, production design, the main point is also to give visual information to the audience about the narrative. So first of all, that. So when you're talking about production design, like any person in general, like who kind of like watches a film, and if you have a production design which is detailed and cinematic and which goes with the narrative, the effect is there. It might be subconscious, but you understand, you take up so many from those elements in the space. So, I think like that's not like Indian audience or Western audience, that people pick up things,
Right.
And you might not even realize it, but you're picking up. Oh, you might see like a little calendar there, it might say something, and you might not even think about it, but it's there in your mind somewhere, It is kind of like helping elevate the drama which is happening, or the history which is of the characters which you are seeing. This, I think, like elements and properties and design in general, people notice, even if it's, of course you notice when there are beautiful castles and palaces being made, you see that. But even if they're not, even when they're realistic, even when they're kind of, you think you're in the world and everything seems believable and realistic, you still pick up a lot of things. You still pick up a lot of elements which really makes sense in terms of the narrative also when you're seeing it. It just adds, it's a layer. It's layers,
Yeah.
Design, it's a narrative, it's a layer. So it's always nice to have a lot of layers.
Also, like, there are certain things which you just get subconsciously. I remember that even when I was a child and I knew nothing about filmmaking, and it's not just about knowing filmmaking and creating spaces, with that knowledge, but it's also a lot to do with knowing life. I think when I was a child and I would see something and it will just not make sense to me, I would say that, this is not how it looks. This is not a house of a person like that can look, or, or something like that. Whenever it just feels wrong, it can seem wrong to you. So I think, I think it's possible for any kind of audience to understand anything, as long as the
we should not underestimate the audience.
The intent and the soul is correct that particular project.
Yes.
I'll just quickly scroll through. Yeah, so basically Priya had a comment that, can the Indian audience understand the question?
Because we don't understand. Okay. That's a good one.
Okay. Now we come back. Okay. I was going to the last part because we have to also wrap up in 10 minutes. But there's one more question, so I'll take that up. Do you think the PD should be equally responsible or should be involved with the DP and the director?
Yes, I think there's no other way. We are one of the main collaborators when it's DP, the director, the cinematographer, and the production designer. There are three people who make a film in production. So there's no other way. If you are not completely collaborating with these, with the director and the DOP, then you all will be making three different films. No.
Yeah.
You have to come
Everybody
together.
will be making their own film.
So you don't want that. That's confusing.
And that's when you maybe sometimes hear the comments like, oh, the production design was nice, the cinematography was nice, or the sound is nice. But what about the film being nice? That is the main.
So that's when the film becomes nice and is more impactful, and it is more interesting for the audience to view when all these three people, these are the three key people who come together. And just to kind of explain this a little further, that in general, production design, costume design and makeup also comes under production design, So in general, like when we're talking about production design, we're talking about production design, art direction, costume design, and makeup, then cinematography, direction, narrative, it all comes together, and voila, you have your film.
Do you want to direct or plan on directing at any point? That's another question from Damini, another cinematographer.
Yes, maybe. I don't really have I don't know whether I have the attention span or right now the motivation to make a feature film, but definitely I am, anyways, I make a lot of I'm very much into documentary photography, and I kind of keep documenting all the time, and I make my tiny little things all the time. So, yes, I hope so. I don't know whether it's going to be a feature film, but I do hope that I do make some kind of a montage, mise en scène. I don't know. Right now, yeah, no, but surely in the future.
So we are almost upon our time, but I do want to touch upon this very crucial, question which is there in everybody's head, mind, of how to go forward, and especially with our two departments, production design and cinematography. These are the two departments which have the maximum number of people involved, oftentimes. So, how do you say we'll function going forward? How do you see?
Proper planning, I guess that's one of the most important thing, because now it can no longer be, okay, nothing is planned or something is planned and then you're just waiting and then suddenly the other department also comes. But to have like a proper concrete plan that, this department is going to get in this time and going to be out at this time, and to make sure it happens like that, because, and also to maybe reduce the number of people. And but that also again depends upon so many things, like sometimes you have to get into a location and you have to finish it at that point of time, and you would require that kind of workforce. So maybe to make sure all the precautions are in place, if your workforce can't be reduced. So proper planning, precautions, hoping to reduce the workforce, hoping for all departments in terms of like production design, cinematography, direction to work together in a more planned way, so everything is kind of like, it's clear, and
Right.
everything is just planned. I think planning, I guess, is required a lot going forward for sure.
Because I think one of the challenges which we often end up facing is that both our departments are working at the same time. On be it a tiny location, it's a challenge anywhere, be it a set or a tiny location anywhere. So I think those are certain things which will have to be streamlined a bit more, so that the working part of these two departments are like absolutely segregated, minus maybe a little bit of some few things, which have to be done when you begin shooting. But I think, other than that, the precautions and a lot of things like you were mentioning earlier are going to change.
Yeah.
And
I hope so.
Yeah. Yeah. I would take one last question, which is from Priya. If do you in India often get control and contribution in the department of costume and makeup?
Yes. I have done it in Titli, I've done it in Agra, I've done it in Sir as well, and in Daddy as well. Yes, yeah.
I think
I have been
because
able to, yeah.
anything which is seen visually in a frame does become.
Depends, yeah, but it also it is a part of our job. It comes under our department, production design, but it also so much depends upon your collaborators, your directors, how much they want to involve you. The films which I was prepping on and never really went on floor, I wasn't that involved in terms of like the costume or the makeup, but in terms of like the films which have actually happened and which are going to release or have released, I have been involved because of my collaborators. They understand what a production designer can get on the table, and they understand what the design department can actually do and is. So it depends so much. So, yeah. And now, going forward nowadays, I do look for projects in which I'm an equal collaborator and a contributor. Because I've always done it even when I was starting out. So now, yes, the emphasis is that I am an equal contributor and a collaborator, for sure.
And also in brief, I mean, I wish that we had more time, but I just missed out on. There has to be a segregation which has to be made between production design and art department. These are two separate I
No,
mean, they are
so
they are part of each other, but at the same
but
time,
it's
there is
a
some
very
confusion.
yeah. This confusion basically is, see, production design designs. Art direction executes the design. So they are the ones who handle the budget which is given by the production designer, along with the designs which is given by the production designer, and they manage the workers, they manage, the coordination, the logistics, and executing the design given. So that is pretty much what it is to it. But in small budget films, like when I was in, say, a Titli, or even in Daddy, Daddy was for 4 schedules, and I was the art director and production designer on 3 of them. On Titli, I was an art director and production designer. Now I've reached a place where I can have an art director and be the production designer. So,
Right.
but generally, as a production designer, you design and you have a design team. And as an art director, you execute that design and you do the logistics of the execution of the design, basically. So that
Right.
is
Right.
the difference, really.
Thank you so much for throwing a
Thank
light on
you.
that
Yeah.
and for giving us so much of your time. I'm
I
really, I
really
mean,
loved it. Yeah.
yeah,
It was
so did
fun.
we, and we
Yeah.
hope to see you back in India very soon on a project, and
Yeah, I hope
see
so.
your
As soon as
excellence.
the
And
international travel starts, because I
yeah,
was prepping a project. So yeah, I hope so.
also waiting eagerly for Sir. I mean, it's so unfortunate that Sir was supposed to release just around the time when lockdown happened,
Yeah, actually,
and
it was supposed to release on 22nd of March, and that was 20th of March. I'm sorry, I think, and all the cinemas and everything was shut on the 17th. My director Rohina actually lives in Paris as well, and she had come specifically for the release. Because Sir has been released in many countries. It has traveled to many festivals. It's been out since 2018. And now was the window when she finally got a clear window to release a film. It's a small film, it's an independent film, it's with actors and not stars really. So, the journey has been, so it's really sad that COVID started, but hoping that after everything gets okay, Sir actually releases by the end of this year, or I hope so, because it's a really fantastic film. It's very simple. It's something which, it's a different kind. It's a film which I think a lot of people would like and relate to because it has got a lot of love throughout the world. So I'm
right.
hoping it gets a lot of love in India as well.
I'm
So
sure it
hope
will.
so. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Parul. Stay
Thank you,
safe and
Priyanka, for having
take
me
care.
here. Yeah, you
Take care.
too. And take care. And thank you, everyone. Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.